I'm here. Could you hear me now?
We hear you very well. Thank you very much.
Very good. Yeah, and so hello from Bissau. I'm conducting another EU mission on the energy reform. So, as we have 7 minutes, what I would like to highlight today is actually a field work. We did like a deep dive field work on evaluating about 18 EFSD and EFSD plus guarantees in 8 countries of Africa mainly. So next slide, please. Thank you very much. The main objective of this was really to, to proceed to a field assessment to identify the market gaps, the challenge in the pipeline development, for the DFI we're implementing the EFSD guarantee, the role of technical assistance and lesson learned from the deployment of those guarantees. And this was a way to basically highlight, specific example of successful and unsuccessful examples, and produce also some recommendations and conclusions and way to improve the guarantee. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yeah, thank you very much. So I would like just to highlight actually 2 key additionality that we really came up strong, from the field work. The first one has to do with the fact that the EFSD guarantees deployed have yielded most of the case significant and tangible additionality for the intermediary entities and the final beneficiaries. I will just give one example. When we were in Kenya, for instance, we reviewed the FMO venture, which is one of the EFSD guarantee DFI implementation, and also Africa Invest, equity investment into what we call higher risk, earlier stage, venture capital, one of which was E3, which frankly is a very early stage, so highly risk. This means that you invest in about 10 companies and about 6 of them won't make it to the finishing line. But out of the 4 remaining one, you have like a multiple of EBITDA and therefore like a high return. And basically, clearly, in the interview of FMO Venture, they stated that if it was not for the EFSD guarantees, they would never have invested into the higher risk, like early venture capital fund. Maybe another one that I think is very interesting is the fact that, again, FMO Nasira, which is another one, a partner with a number of CDM banks, different banks that basically managed to venture much deeper into rural area, more risky SME segments. So basically, the EFSD helped actually those DFI to reach out to segments that would have not been addressed before. The second additionality, which is complementary to the first one, is the fact that the EFSD guarantees help those DFI to reach out countries that we would never do business with. For instance, South Sudan. The case, for instance, of the Fin Fund, who has set up a digital fund. Well, they have set up and invested in tower companies that were in South Sudan. And as you know, South Sudan is a highly fragile country. I just came back from it, 2 months ago in my team myself. Another example too is the KFW TCX hedging. As you know, this is like one of the main and most efficient actually foreign exchange, hedging facility. And basically that allows, to be able to do lending and to hedge positions in local currencies. And I think that's very important. Next slide, please. Now, clearly, everything is not perfect. One thing that we saw is that, one of the segments that is targeted by the EFSD and EFSD Plus is infrastructure. And on that, there is still quite a lot of improvement. So I will proceed to about 6 or 7, key recommendations that we made to the EFSD board in December and again in April. The first one possibly is simplify the guarantee. One thing that we definitely noticed is that most of the DFI came back with us with the fact that there should be a standardization of the terms and conditions. Sometimes negotiation of the guarantees takes up to 2 years, and sometimes the pipeline that was developed, earlier by the DFI is no longer valid, once we come to the finishing line. So simplification and standardization of the terms. The second also is to adapt the guarantees to the evolving project needs, particularly in the case of infrastructure, which is something that I know quite well. In project finance, you have very long maturities. You have also sometimes very long negotiations. And so basically the implementation of infrastructure-related EFSD is not a success yet. There has been a few cases, but for instance, I was involved in the midterm evaluation of EGRE, which is the European Guarantee for Renewable Energy in Mozambique, and basically the inclusion period was about 4 years, and it took about 5 years, to get to the finishing line. So I was there actually physically in Mozambique when the inclusion period of EFSD came to a stop in November of 2024, and so basically the guarantee was no longer valid when we were in a crucial phase of negotiation. So sometime to include longer inclusion period, and adapting actually to the realities of infrastructure, long-term tenor, and also long-term negotiation. So that's mainly on the infrastructure. Also, some of the burden that was put on the financial intermediaries, particularly, were the reporting requirements. When you have a small or medium-sized bank, let's say in Kenya or Tanzania, they don't have sometimes the processes, certainly not the manpower, to be able to do the heavy reporting, every quarterly that is needed, from the EFSD. And so possibly simplifying a little bit the reporting, trying to make it easier, for the financial intermediaries and the DFI alike. Next slide. Technical assistance, that is very, very important. As you know, EFSD, package comes with a technical assistance, sometimes 5 million, 6 million, and those are very, very crucial package to help basically implement. For instance, in the case of infrastructure, clearly all the feasibility studies, the preparedness of the operator who would be operating the assets, all of that is extremely important to ensure the success actually of the lending or the equity position, whatever is the position taken by the DFI. And so in the case not only of that, but also financial intermediaries who sometimes need to have training, frameworks, helping them on the reporting, on the ESG, gender reporting, all of that is very, very important. One remark on technical assistance is that it needs to be taken place earlier rather than later. So the earlier we have that, the preparation, the better we can ensure the success of the guarantee implementation and the project implementation. Extend also the inclusion period. Again, I stated that there is very different cases. Sometimes in the private sector, a project finance should be finished in 6 to 9 months. On the other hand, in the public sector, we know that negotiation can take 4 to 6 years. So I think as a measure of prudence, especially in the case of infrastructure, related guarantees, we need to enlarge.
Can you please conclude with?
Please, absolutely. This is the last thing. And then I would say improve the alignment between the project pipeline and the guarantee activation. And especially one of the things that is interesting is private sector mobilization. We have seen cases, for instance, in the IFU ESG, where the guarantee really helped to mobilize a layer of institutional private sector. And as we know, with the Global Gateway, we're trying to encourage private sector involvement. So I think guarantee, especially if we enlarge to a much larger package, should be used as a lever to be able to mobilize private sector. And last slide, I'm almost finished. Next slide, please. Thank you. So I think as a conclusion, we have a consensus on the additionality and the risk mitigation. There are really some really good guarantees and deployment, FMO Nasira, TCX, KFW, AFD, also AGRINFI, which have proven additionality. On the other hand, on the improvement side, certainly there should be a shorter, negotiation package, maybe standard, especially with DFI with whom we have worked already, not restart the negotiation from scratch. Enhance the negotiation on the guarantees terms. Also, maybe soften a little bit the eligibility criteria. Many of them are related to gender, to inclusion of women, youth, and that. And we've seen that through the COVID, the relaxation of the eligibility criteria allowed a much better use of the guarantees. So there should be some improvement there. And last but not least, since there is a strong focus on infrastructure, that is where the main work needs to be focused, especially with larger volume. We can make a huge difference in the infrastructure, which is not yet proven in the field. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Spakart. You had 3 minutes extra. Very generous of this House. We now turn to Ms. Michela Gavas from the Center for Global Development. Just to remind you, have 7 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chair and co-chairs. I'm very pleased to present the results of a study that we have done on the EFSD+. And this is a study that we did with our colleagues from Lions Head Global Partners, who are also with me today. Just to give you some background, this study is part of our broader work program on how, in very practical terms, we can deliver greater leverage, effectiveness, and efficiency of EU concessional finance. And that is particularly in a context of immense financing needs in our partner countries, exacerbated by debt distress and aid budget cuts across the board. So let me just start briefly by stepping back and looking at guarantees. So as you know, guarantees lower the risk exposure for lenders and investors so that they feel comfortable entering a market, allowing for newly unlocked capital to achieve a much greater return. Now, while they are a key and increasingly popular tool for mobilizing private capital, please note they are not always appropriate in every context. Guarantees are most useful and relevant where markets are sufficiently developed rather than in challenging contexts and in challenging social sectors. Also note that guarantees are typically priced at market rates plus an administrative fee, with ODA, Official Development Assistance, subsidies applied to reduce the cost and risk premium. However, significantly subsidized guarantees run the risk of not only crowding out private sector actors, but also other public guarantee providers. And this represents an inefficient and ineffective use of limited ODA resources. So our focus for the study was at the strategic level on the design and deployment of the EFSD+ guarantee instrument. And we set out to explore the landscape of major guarantee providers to draw lessons for the EU guarantee. We conducted interviews with various stakeholders and then did some financial modeling to assess provisioning rates and risk exposure of the EFSD+ guarantees. So very briefly, and a lot of the challenges I've already mentioned, we identified 3 major challenges. Firstly, the structure. It is overly complex. This slows deployment and deters private sector engagement. It is complex, for example, in the fact that entry for implementing partners is via the pillar assessment, which entails a very prolonged administrative process and limits implementing partners to public institutions, excluding private entities. Complex in the fact that the EFSD+ is spread across 3 investment windows for over 17 programs, each served by overlapping institutions with varying provisioning rates and funding sources. So all this complexity creates administrative bottlenecks between the Commission and its implementing partners. It discourages private sector investment, and it ultimately undermines the efficiency and transparency of the instrument. Secondly, its monitoring frameworks are weak, making it difficult to assess development impact or prove additionality. Now, here we differ slightly from the Commission deep dive in the definition of additionality. So by law, the EFSD Plus, their mandate is to deliver projects that would not have occurred without EU support, ensuring additionality over existing market solutions. Nevertheless, we find that it remains opaque whether the EFSD Plus financing is catalyzing new investments or actually displacing existing ones. The evaluation done by the European Court of Auditors also highlights that there is insufficient evidence regarding how EFSD Plus interventions differ from business as usual investments and how much impact they achieve. And thirdly, risk. Risk is managed inefficiently with a single uniform provisioning rate that does not reflect the diversity of the portfolio, and that ties up capital that could otherwise support new and high-impact projects. And without an effective mechanism to hedge foreign exchange risk, the development banks and DFIs are left either absorbing that risk themselves or passing it on to local partners, both of which threaten market stability and undermine the socioeconomic objectives the EFSD Plus is meant to support. So, three recommendations, three proposals, looking at the structural and operational efficiency, impact and effectiveness, and financial efficiency. Firstly, we suggest that to address the administrative complexity and improve implementation, we suggest unifying the EFSD Plus under a single umbrella guarantee framework by standardizing contracts and consolidating operations into fewer, larger contracts. We also suggested that collaboration, much better collaboration and coordination between the DFIs and development banks needed, and this needed to be enhanced to overcome competition and over-subsidization, including through guarantees. Secondly, to strengthen transparency, ensure EFSD Plus complements rather than displaces private capital, and encourage wider market participation. We propose much better information sharing and leveraging better information sharing between the DFIs and guarantee programs to actually identify when transactions are additional. Crucially, we're suggesting publishing up-to-date project and program level data on publicly accessible platforms. And this would enhance accountability and investor confidence. And thirdly, we've suggested creating a special niche oriented towards private sector mobilization by bringing in financial institutions directly regulated by the European Central Bank, thereby avoiding the pillar assessment, including through banks under the ECB's purview. And finally, to optimize capital use and improve risk-sharing mechanisms, we highlighted the importance of reinvesting reflows, reallocating surpluses, and crucially, increasing flexibility in provisioning. We also suggested expanding support for local currency lending by reinvesting reflows from existing guarantee programs. And this would help mitigate foreign exchange risk and enhance the financial sustainability of local investments. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much to all three guest speakers. Colleagues, we now have time for an exchange of views, a Q&A with members. The playbook for today's meeting foresees 2 rounds. Since we're running late, already 20-25 minutes, perhaps we can reduce it to 1 round. So I would simply just like to ask you, who would like to take the floor? Please show your hands. I understand that there's no request to take the floor from the EPP side. Then on the S&D side, the first speaker is Evin Inchir. Please.
Thank you very much, Chair. It is plural. And thanks to our guests for being here today. Just a few questions from my side, and it mainly goes to the European Court of Auditors, because as far as I understood, and please do correct me if I'm wrong, is that the evaluation and assessment hasn't really, I didn't really understand what part has been assessed and evaluated, since there were a lot of parts that has not yet been done. So my question is, and those parts that has been assessed and evaluated, there are quite a lot of lack of successes, to be a bit diplomatic, and also I would say sometimes a failure to head towards reaching the goals. Could you maybe also share with us if there are any successes at all in those parts that you have managed to assess and evaluate? You mentioned the environment and migration has not been a success. What about gender equality, for example? Do you see that the work of it has been successful on that part? And why I'm just stressing that it would be important to know if there are any successes is because we live right now in a time where many of our member states, unfortunately, is cutting down on the support to development and international cooperation and aid, which is essential in order to reach the SDGs. And we already know after the pandemic, not at least, or during the pandemic, that we will not reach the SDGs. So it is very important to do everything we can to ensure that we mobilize correctly. Thank you.
Thank you, Evin Inchia. For the PFE, I don't see a request to take the floor, neither from a representative of the ECR group. Then we move on to the Renew group, and that is Charles Goerens.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président. L'évaluation s'avère être un instrument extrêmement délicat parce que par les temps qui courent, nous savons que des deux côtés de l'Atlantique, il y en a, passez-moi l'expression, qui se précipitent sur chaque panne révélée par une évaluation comme la vérole sur le bac clergé. C'est malheureux, mais c'est comme ça. Ça fonctionne comme ça. Donc l'évaluateur, il est toujours... pour lui, c'est un cas de conscience. Est-ce que je vais accuser ou stigmatiser avec toute la brutalité une panne révélée? Est-ce que je dois faire valoir des circonstances atténuantes ou non? S'agissant de l'EFST et de l'EFST+, il y a quand même une différence au niveau du leverage impact entre le fonds d'investissement Juncker, qui avait un leverage impact de 1 à 16, et je crois qu'avec les opérations qui se déroulent dans le cadre du EFST et EFST+, c'est très inférieur. Je crois que c'est à peine la moitié, peut-être 1 à 6 ou 1 à 5. Est-ce qu'on tient compte dans les évaluations de ce handicap qui est comme ça? On doit le constater, il existe. Ou est-ce qu'on n'en tient pas compte? Donc l'attractivité dépend aussi de la façon dont nous abordons les pannes qui peuvent, le cas échéant, être révélées dans le cadre d'une évaluation. Moi, je persiste à croire qu'on ne veut pas juger de la même façon des opérations qui se font au sein de l'Union européenne, où nous avons des procédures extrêmement rigoureuses, et à l'extérieur. J'aimerais un peu éclairer sur la façon dont vous abordez aussi bien à la Cour des comptes que vous dans votre évaluation ce problème extrêmement délicat. Il est d'une importance cruciale dans notre façon aussi de présenter les choses. Nous avons aussi une responsabilité à bien interpréter les résultats d'une évaluation en tant que parlementaire, tout en étant extrêmement parcimonieux et extrêmement méticuleux dans notre analyse. Merci.
Thank you. Would somebody from the Green Group like to take the floor? That is not the case. For the left? Also not the case. For the ESN? No, that is not the case. Look, I'm asking once again, anyone else would like to take the floor? What I would then suggest is that, Janusz, you continue chairing the meeting. You hand back over to our guest speakers and to the representative of the Commission.
Right. Thank you. As for now, experts have the floor. 4 minutes each, please. Starting with Court of Auditors.
Thank you, and thank you for your interest in our opinion and for the questions. To answer the first questions, whether we can also raise any successes of the AFET-DEVE-BUDG, I would like to just repeat, as Beatrix said, we haven't carried out an audit of the European Fund for Sustainable Development Plus as such. What we did was to assess the quality and completeness of the Commission evaluation of the External Action Guarantee. So therefore, it is rather difficult for us to answer this question. Nevertheless, what we have said in our conclusion is that the evaluation certainly contains useful insights into the functioning of the External Action Guarantee. Now, what we did as part of our work was, let's say, a compliance test. Basically, the NDICI regulation precisely defines the criteria that were supposed to be covered by the Commission evaluation, be it the contribution to the overall objectives, be it additionality, be it the achievement of results. And unfortunately, as I have showed during the presentation, many of these criteria have not been exhaustively answered. When it comes to additionality, one term that was mentioned, there's also a very precise definition in the NDICI regulation. So for more details, this is what you will find inside in our opinion. To answer the second question, yes, we are fully aware that carrying out an evaluation, especially at an early stage of implementation of a program, is a delicate exercise, and we have recognized it in our opinion that basically the evaluation has taken place in a far more difficult context because it's outside the EU rather than inside the EU. Now, Beatrix, would you maybe like to compliment me? Thank you.
Yeah, and just to compliment, I think as with every work we do for the court, we always try to do a thorough analysis and also to look into, to come up with a balanced view in the sense that we and that's what we did also for this opinion, that we looked into a variety of not only documents, tried to see, okay, the pros and cons of different views. We also consulted the different services, and I think that was really essential to really make sure that we properly understood the different concerns, the pros and cons, and that we probably also understood the complexity of the whole of this whole instrument. So, but this is, as I said, we try to do that for each and every report that we produce. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I'm inviting Mr. Kolb, remote, to appear and link.
Sorry, this is going to be me because Mrs. Kolb was impeached by health reasons, so I will respond. Yeah, I'm part of the same team. Actually, I'm the director. So I'm going to respond to the first question that was asked, if you allow me, regarding cases of success. I would like to really provide a field view on this because we want to actually look at 18 guarantees. We look at them, as a look-through approach, meaning that we first interview the DFI, then we want to interview actually either the financial intermediaries, the banks, or the funds that have benefited from the guarantee. And then we were all the way down to the final beneficiaries. And I can state, and I would like to moderate the statement that was stated, in that out of the 18, I would say that about 12 of the guarantees were relative success, clearly bringing additionality. As I said, for instance, just two examples, EDFI MSMEs platform managed through the guarantee to successfully lend out to microfinance institutions, for instance, in Senegal and other countries like Apollo and Cofina, which then managed to provide better terms, to smallholder farmers. So this is what I call a additionality to weaker and more fragile, type and segments of beneficiaries. The other example, I would say, of success or additionality is the KfW or TCX hedging capacity for interest rate. They now operate in about 60 currencies, worldwide. They have, I think, a balance sheet of about 4 billion euro. This is clearly one of the key instruments that has been also enabled, I would say, by the EFSD. So I think we should look at, we can look at the cup, as being half full or half empty. I think we should see as a half full, but with a lot of potential clearly on reaching more success and more additionality, especially in the infrastructure related, where clearly the design of the EFSD guarantees was not really tied to the conditions, the terms, and the tenor of like long-term, project finance, and therefore that needs to be reassessed in our view. So I just wanted to provide that feel because we went to the field, we went to see actually implementation of EFSD guarantees, and quite many of them provided some additionality. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I am inviting Mrs. Gavas.
Thank you very much. So, as I mentioned, our study was really focused on the strategic level, on looking at the design and deployment. We didn't examine specific guarantee agreements or implementation of those agreements. Now, when we do these studies as a think tank, at the Center for Global Development, we are guided by the evidence. Our role is essentially to offer practical propositions which are both politically and technically feasible, because we know we are not operating in a vacuum here. They need to be politically and technically feasible. And we do this by also drawing on best practice. And that's why we looked across the guarantee provider landscape to try and pull out some of that best practice and some of the more innovative ideas and uses of the guarantee. Now, as we look to the next MFF, we really do believe that these improvements would enhance the impact and efficiency of EU concessional finance more broadly. And what are we trying to do? We're trying to ensure that every scarce euro goes that much further in achieving development objectives. Thank you.
Thank you. I think Commission should be activated. Yes, Mr. Kuiper, please. Head of Unit, External Action Guarantees.
That's right. Thank you, Chair, and thank you for activating me. This is all very, very well taken, obviously, these studies. We need those studies to improve. When we look at this, we have to take a step back and look at the task sheet for EFSD+, which was effectively to bring investment to places where nobody else wants to go. Least developed countries in Africa, we've seen examples from South Sudan, microfinance enterprises, again, around some of the most difficult markets in the world. So against that background, I think overall we have some really spectacular successes in EFSD+. But it's of course also clear that not everything has been perfect on the first go. And that's where the conclusions of these different studies and of the ECHA report are extremely welcome. We have already, in fact, as we went along, taken many of the recommendations on board. For example, we have standardized, wherever possible, our guarantee agreements. We have consolidated several guarantees so as to have a smaller number of different guarantees and make the whole process more streamlined. We have also set up, for the moment for internal purposes, a near real-time monitoring system so that we can track the investments on the ground that we trigger, the kind of investments that ECM went on the ground and tracked. So we can follow those much more efficiently now. We have also revamped the EFSD Plus, both the external website that's publicly available and the internal website that's available to the EU delegations, for example, to help them deploy the program. So a lot of things we've tried to do already. Of course, many things then also to lessons learned and all the rest of it to take into account for the next MFF. I would like to highlight 3 points perhaps that were all mentioned by the consultants. One is, as CGD mentioned, the right now relatively cumbersome sort of entry assessment to work with this program. While you have many banks that are direct supervised by the European Central Bank, I mean, why not consider European Central Bank direct supervision as a sufficient entry requirement to participate in EFSD+. Risk management, the chair mentioned that we have surplus provisioning, which is due to the fact that inherently our risk management is very conservative because of the markets that we're looking at, and on the other hand, the fact that people generally default less on the kind of banks that we work with. This is particularly stark in equity investments that as we have seen, can be very powerful, where we must assume right now that every single investment we made is 100% lost, when the reality is that we don't make huge profits, but we're more or less ending up plus minus zero. So there perhaps in the next regulation, having some kind of fixed provisioning rate for equity investments could make a huge difference, given that we are right now really very heavily over-provisioning, in particular equity investments. And then finally, I think it's worth looking at the various horizontal requirements, not so much the requirements themselves. I'm talking here about safeguards against breach of EU sanctions, money laundering, tax evasion, and so on. Obviously, all these are extremely important. However, right now, the rules by which we're supposed to transpose those to an SME in Africa sometimes seem to be very heavy. And takes a long time to negotiate them. When colleagues mentioned that it can sometimes take 1 or 2 years to negotiate these guarantees, 3/4 of this time, typically 75% of the time, is about these horizontals. The commercial elements are normally resolved within, I'm not saying days, but they're resolved within 2 or 3 months. And then you have all the implementing provisions around these safeguards. So it's worth looking not at the safeguards themselves, in my view, but in the way that they need to be passed down along the implementation chain to sometimes very small African enterprises that find it very hard to deal with them, obviously. These would be my remarks. But again, thank you for this discussion, and thank you for these extremely valuable evaluations that obviously are very helpful to us that we work with this on the ground.
Thank you. For rich conclusions is Robert Deve.
Thank you very much, Janusz, and thank you very much to both of you for co-chairing this meeting and participation of our excellent experts. Thank you for your contribution. This evaluation for sure will be pretext for continuation of our discussion on the next MFF. Of course, we are preparing for that, and in the context of this fragile environment we are living now, and the discussions on the development policies, including withdrawal U.S. engagement in that, and many ODAs cuts in many member states. I think this is very crucial that we also look for, we have a close look at the complexity of this instrument today discussed. So I want to thank you for the conclusions and recommendations. We take of them, of course, into consideration in our work, and we transfer it to our colleagues. We see also that the collaboration, closer collaboration and synergies are very needed between different bodies. Discussion on the rule of EIB, for example. Then on horizontal requirements, I understand your point, and thank you very much of mentioning the role of that and the procedures. Transparency, very important for our house, of course, and thank you for mentioning that, including also the better information and data sharing, the flexibility of the instrument is also at stake, and I agree every euro invested to these development policies needs to bring, of course, the added value for development and all the actions we take outside EU. So once again, thank you very much for this evaluation. We take it with us. We will work on that. Thank you for participation at this hearing. Thank you for colleagues from different committees for your engagement. Our interpreters, thank you for your work. And we reconvene our meeting of DEVE committee at 12 o'clock in this room. Thank you. Have a good afternoon.